The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Matthew. Lord. 6 days after Peter had acknowledged Jesus as the Christ, the Son of the living God, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I'll make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the Beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Tell no one about the vision until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord. Good morning. In seminary, there were 2 questions. First one was always, well, how many Episcopalians does it take to change a light bulb? The answer was always the same, 10. 1 to actually change the light bulb, and 9 more to moan and groan about how wonderful the old one was. Then the question is, well, how many Lutherans does it take to change a light bulb? The answer was always the same. Change? I know this to fact. I married a Lutheran. So here we are, the last Sunday after the Epiphany. The last Sunday after the Epiphany. Epiphany from a Greek word which means to manifest, to show forth, to reveal. A revelation. To see something as it really is. Epiphany. Last Sunday, the 7th Sunday, it's been a long Epiphany. Come Wednesday, Lent. No more Alleluias, no more Glorias until Easter. We go into the desert spiritually, we look inside ourselves, we do some extra reading, hopefully give some extra money where it's needed. We do other things to focus on Jesus and who Jesus really is. So here we are, the last Sunday after the Epiphany, just before entering the desert. And we're given the great Epiphany, the great showing forth, the great manifestation, the great revelation. Jesus is transfigured. First of all, he takes from his small church that he has, his small group of believers, he takes the senior warden, the junior warden, and the head of the evangelism committee, and he goes up the mountain. Peter, James, and John, the big 3. Up they go to the mountain for a time away, a time of prayer. They're on the mountain, and something special happens. Something really significant happens. A cloud, a bright light. Jesus' face shines like the sun. He's in total whiteness. Peter and James and John hit the deck. They're in fear. They look up, and all of a sudden they see 2 other figures in the cloud with Jesus. 2 other figures. Moses, the great lawgiver, the one who was himself a mountain kind of guy, who went up the Mount Sinai and was covered by a cloud. His face and garment shone too. He came down with the 10 commandments and gave them to the people, and of course they turned them into 10 suggestions. But the 10 commandments, they came down, Moses came down the mountain. So he was on the mountain there. People saw, Peter, James, and John saw him. Also with him was Elijah, the great prophet of Israel. Now Elijah was a mountain-type guy too. Elijah, you may remember, because I know you're Episcopalians, you know all about the Hebrew Scriptures as well as the New Testament Christian Scriptures. Elijah, the great prophet, also was a mountain man because it was there on top of Mount Carmel that Moses faced down the prophets of Baal with Jezebel at the head of them, and defeated Jezebel on Mount Carmel. So here the two on the mountaintop, probably Mount Hermon, probably about 9,000 feet in the air, rarefied situation going on here, and they see Moses and Elijah with Jesus. And then all of a sudden they're gone. And then a voice, and the voice says, "This is my beloved, my son." And then, listen to him. Listen. He had Moses and he had Elijah, but the voice says, listen to him. And he changed and transfigured in a look ahead to the resurrection, a different type of body, a dazzling white. A look back to Moses and Elijah, a look ahead to the resurrection to come. And here they are experiencing all this. Peter, being the impetuous person he is, says right away, well, let's do something material. Let's build some structures. You know, that's a good church trick. Let's build some structures. That's it. We need more structures. And Jesus, of course, says none of that. There's none of that going on. All right, so we're here, they're here on the mountain. We had a transfiguration experience. I've been retired for, next month it'll be 10 years. And so I haven't preached at Christmas or Easter in over 10 years. Because, you know, the rector always preaches on Christmas and Easter. I preach on the Sunday after Easter quite a bit and the Sunday after Christmas. But I love Christmas. And the reason I love Christmas, I mean, you know, I don't like all the baloney about the gifts and buying everything for everybody who's already got everything and going, and then let down at Christmas when it's, like that. I mean, what Christmas really means, that is the Word becoming flesh and dwelling among us. That's Christmas. The Word in the Spirit coming and dwelling in a human being, Jesus walking among us. The Word becoming flesh. And the reason I like that so much is because I've been all over the country in churches, parishes, all over the place, and I see in every one of them the Word becoming flesh continuously in people, reaching out and touching people in love, reaching out outside the bounds of the church, within the church, in the community, the same thing, the Word becoming flesh. And so it is that I'm excited about the Transfiguration because I see in every parish that I've been in, including this one, I see transfigured life by the power of the Holy Spirit. I see transfigurations happening all over the place. It's human experience. It's happened to me, and it's happened, I'm guessing, to most of you. Transfiguration is something that keeps on happening in human life. If you have spiritual ears and eyes open enough and the heart to glimpse it. See? But I just wanted to tell you from the mountaintop that it still happens. You see? It still happens. Mary Gordon is a novelist who's written several books. In one of the books, she says about this incident on the mountaintop, the Epiphany, the Transfiguration. She says about this was an incident of total whiteness. This was Jesus demanding, insisting to be seen for who he is. No more buds, no more, he's just not another buddy, he's not just another teacher, he's not just another moralist. This is something different. This is the presence of God amongst us. And it was Jesus demanding and insisting on the Transfiguration that he be seen for who he is. Mary Gordon recounts in one of her books that she was in San Francisco and wandered into a Roman Catholic church in San Francisco a couple of years ago, and there was a Chinese priest there, and he was celebrating the Mass, and he was about to preach. Half was in Mandarin and half was in English. And she was fortunate enough that she didn't know Mandarin, so the priest decided to preach in English, and he preached the sermon. And during the sermon, he talked about the Transfiguration. And he said that the Transfiguration is still happening because he had just had this experience days before he preached this sermon. He was in the parish working with, as has been for a couple of months, with a young man who was mentally handicapped. And so between the two of them, there was that feeling, you know, I'm not sure what to do and say and so forth. So he said to the young man during one of a recent conference, he said, Bill, do you pray? And Bill said, yes, I pray. And he said, well, when you pray, what happens? How do you pray? And he says, well, the way I pray is I listen. I listen. And the priest said, well, when you listen, what do you hear? The priest said, and the young man said, I hear, you are my beloved, with whom I am well pleased. And the priest looked up during the ceremony, looked at the congregation, and says, we should all be hearing this. We should all be listening and hearing this. You are my beloved. With you, I am well pleased. Transfigured that priest right there on the spot. Always on and on it goes, on and on it goes. A young lady named Jane Sleebach was in, last year, came from the Midwest in a small town to an urban center in the Northeast. And she got an apartment in the neighborhood. She took me a while to get accustomed to urban life and so forth, but she started to embrace little by little the culture and the lifestyle and so forth. The one thing she didn't like was across the street from her was a tattoo parlor. And there was always people day and night fighting out and yelling and fighting outside this tattoo parlor. And so that upset her a great deal. But she put up with it a couple of months. Well, then she got in with a group of young women like herself, the same age, so forth, and they all had tattoos. So she kind of felt the pressure, and she said, well, I think maybe I better get a tattoo. So one day she walks across the street to the tattoo parlor. She walks in, she gets an artist. The artist sits down with her, and he said, what do you want for a tattoo? What's it going to be? And she said, right here on the wrist, I want you to write, love thy neighbor. He said, well, love thy neighbor, you know. This guy's tooed up all over the place. Love thy neighbor. She said, yeah. Love thy neighbor. I'm having a tough time loving my neighbor right now across the street, you people in this place, because you're always harassing women and going off on men, intimidating men, and I'm tired. I'd like to love my neighbor, but I can't because of this. The artist goes to the proprietor's in the back again. Turns around. He said, Manuel, dude. He said, we got to stop the fighting outside. It's hurting our neighbors. So he goes back and he does the tattoo, love thy neighbor, and she leaves. About a month later, she's walking back on the same side of the street from the grocery store, and here comes the proprietor, Manuel. And he's with another guy, and they're walking toward him. So she's wondering, oh boy, here we go. So she's walking up to him. Manuel steps up to her, puts a big bear hug on her. I mean, puts the big hug on her. And says to the other guy, his friend, he says, man, he said, this is our neighbor. Isn't she something? There was a live Transfigured. She hadn't seen a fight or heard a fight or swearing or anything out there in a month. This dude was changed, transfigured. And what did it? Love thy neighbor. I want to love my neighbor. This is my neighbor, with whom I'm well pleased. Okay, 1953, June 9th, 1953, Worcester, Massachusetts. I'm 13 years old. I'm playing in the schoolyard about a quarter of a block from the school. I'm playing a friend of mine, Jim Avery, and we're in there, and it gets dark, and I've referred to this before, but I want to do it quickly again for those of you who weren't here, which is about three-quarters of it. It got dark, the wind started to blow, huge hail backing on our heads, so we wanted to run to the schoolhouse, old brick New England schoolhouse. So running towards it. And trying to get there, couldn't move because the wind was stuck picking us. All of a sudden, out of the school door, I was this broken guy in a white t-shirt and jeans, and I'll never forget it. Keys hanging off, Jim, trying to get to us in slow motion, trying to get out there. His face was all weird, because he was battling the winds, and he knew he was in trouble, and he knew we were in trouble, and he had beefy hands. I'll never forget those hands. And the hands reached out and grabbed me around the neck collar, and he grabbed Jim Avery around the collar. I mean, this guy was putting his life in danger, obviously. And so he got us inside, he threw us down, he told us it's probably a hurricane or something. And they went outside afterwards, and no car. It was a tornado. Real bad tornado. Went up, we could hear the sirens, the smoke was billowing. I could hear my mother yelling for me in the streets, and all other people yelling for their kids, and other people, and the smoke and the sirens going on and everything. Well, what I haven't told you or anybody before is this. I never, ever, and I graduated that year I was there 8 years in school. I knew Mr. Putnam was our janitor. This guy was not our janitor. I'd never, ever seen him before, and I never, ever saw him again, ever. He was, okay, I tell you that. Now, I'm not saying this was Jesus. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is this. I have, up until that time, I just also 2 years of tough confirmation class with an English priest who was battering us with theology and stuff that we didn't understand. And I was just confirmed. I was 13 years old. And I got to tell you this, after this, I had no problem with the word salvation. And I had no problem with somebody being saved, because it had just happened to me. And what I had from then on was a great love of that passage I referred to 2 weeks ago about Jesus on the coming in the storm on the Sea of Galilee and asking Peter to come, and Peter goes down, and the hand of Jesus goes down and clasps him and brings him up and saves him. I'll never forget the hands of this guy who saved me. Put that together with a mysterious figure like this, and I've never forgotten about being saved. Really saved. It was one of the transfiguring, transformative moments for me, and I ended up 10 years ago, there I was in Chicago, of all places, going to seminary, of all things. They're still saying in my neighborhood, "What? You went to seminary? What?" He's a priest. What? You see? Transfiguration's happening all the time around us. All the time around us. Now, this event was not to be taken just for itself. It's nice. We're high in the mountain. It's like going to Mount Calvary with the vestry on a retreat. It's nice, but you got to go down. Everything that was given here in terms of the voice and the cloud and the transparency of Jesus at this time, all pointed to going down the mountain. See? The last part of this gospel passage is Jesus took Peter, James, and John, and they went down the mountain with him, and they went down, and they went full force into this struggling, sick, hungry group of people who were waiting at the bottom. The first thing he did after he came down with Peter, James, and John was to heal an epileptic boy. You see? Healing in the world. When someone says, a voice from heaven says, listen to him, listen to him. Listening does not mean just hearing, but listening means being obedient. Being obedient to loving your neighbor. Being obedient to loving others as I have loved you. You see? You can't stay on the mountain. It's nice, it's great, it's powerful, but you can't stay there. You can't stay in the church. You've got to go out and enter humanity and love them and be obedient to Jesus, who says, listen to me. So, we go into Lent, we're going into the desert, so to speak. We need to make a point to open the ears. We all have physical ears, but the spiritual ears, the spiritual eyes, and the spirit in the heart. Open up and listen. Listen closely enough. We're going to hear just what they heard on the mountain and just what that young man, that handicapped man in San Francisco heard. can hear it. You are my beloved. With you I am well pleased. Listen. Lent is a good time to listen.